good. How are you?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good.
Good, good. Let me just check. I'm all recording. Everything's going. I can hear you well. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear, mate. All good.
Loud and clear. Well, here, Jordan, let's get straight into it. Look at us both on time or a wee bit early. This is good. How's things? Thank you for joining me.
No, pleasure to be on the show, mate. No, thank you for inviting me. All good my side. Trying to get back into some kind of normality after a crazy 12 months like the rest of the world. But, hopefully we're making progress.
How did you cope through all the sort of the crazy times? Because obviously, I'm right in saying that your paddle around the UK that was sort of cut short a little bit, and you obviously you had that plan. You were smashing it, and then you had to sort of pack up and head home and get into isolation. How have you been?
Yeah, it was always on track. I set off from Essex Marina in the sort of southeast of England on the 26th of July 2020, and then unfortunately your good First Minister of Scotland told me that I had to pack up and go home on Christmas Eve. So we did 149 days at sea, 2,377 kilometers, but most importantly, we raised, nearly £100,000 for a children's charity. So for me, it was cut short, but it was still a great success. And it's always about why you do something, not what you do, where adventure's concerned from my perspective.
Following you on Instagram, and I mean that adventure alone, and we'll get this. You've done so much that we'll try and cover as much as we can in this sort of 45 minutes to an hour. But that sort of paddle round Great Britain, how an experienced paddleboarder were you before you took on that challenge? Because I know you've done things before where you maybe haven't been proficient in the adventure that you're about to, or the world record that you're about to take on. What was your paddleboarding experience like?
pretty much the same as previous. I'd never paddled on the ocean before I set off, and that was probably a reflection of why I went, because if I'd have known what I was getting myself into, I probably wouldn't have set off at that time of year either. Heading into the west coast of Scotland in the winter is not recommended. But we had an amazing adventure, and part of the journey was to show young people that you don't have to be the fittest, the fastest, or the best in the world. You've just got to carry that spirit of endeavour and never give up and keep pushing forward, whatever the conditions are. So, it was a brilliant adventure, and I think if I'd have known what I was getting myself into, I probably wouldn't have set off if the truth be told.
So, with the first sort of couple of days or week, was that kind of really learning how to take a wave, how to brace yourself while something that you haven't, I'm on the water quite a lot with paddleboards and things like that, and still get thrown about and chucked off. What was the first sort of couple of days like for you?
The first few days, the first week, I probably spent more time in the water than on the paddleboard. And there was a lot of kneeling as well. At first, I just couldn't get to grips with it because I'd only ever used an inflatable stand-up paddleboard on the local rivers. I'd never been on a hardboard on the ocean, which is, going on the ocean is a challenge in itself, but doing it on a board, that is a lot more sensitive and it's just a completely different ball game altogether. And I learned the hard way, but I think that was part of the fun of it at the same time. And if I'd have started anywhere else in the country but the South Coast, again, I wouldn't have made the progress I made, because I think paddling down the South Coast of England in the summer gave me the conditions that were, I wouldn't say favourable, but certainly more conducive to a beginner paddler than the West Coast of Scotland in winter, because I'd have never made any progress if I'd have started in the north of Great Britain.
And as the clocks changed and the darker nights drew in, what was your sort of schedule? I mean, were you paddling obviously a lot through darkness and not being able to see too far in front of you, and the way that must play with your mind if you've got to get up early or you've got to stay up late into the night while you're on the open ocean? What was that like?
Yeah, I think, in the first half of the paddle was probably the physically most demanding, but the second half, the windows for paddling were few and far between, especially, through the winter, through the west. When we left Northern Ireland and we paddled to sort of the Mull of Kintyre, after that, all through the Inner Hebrides, up past Skye and towards Cape Wrath, it was what I guess we sort of coined it micro paddling, because you just had to take the opportunities when they came. There was no fixed schedule. There was no sort of 6 hours with the tide and 6 off like you might get in other parts of the world. But in Scotland, every day is a bit of a lottery at that time of year. And sometimes we were doing an hour, sometimes we were doing 10 hours, and you just didn't know from one day to the next what conditions you were going to get. And quite often we would paddle through the night, pitch black, sometimes no moonlight, no stars, cloud cover. So it was really tough. But again, I think that's part of the magic of the adventure, isn't it? At the same time.
Was there times? Well, what are you like on these adventures with the mornings where your body's aching? Is it the charity that gets you through? Is it the end game of the reason that you're doing it? How do you sort of work with your emotions to get back on that, back on that board, or in other adventures that you've done to start that climb again, or get running? How do you do it with your own mind?
Yeah, I think there's two things really. I think one is always remembering, why you started in the first place. I would call it remembering your why. I think, for me, it's always about a bigger picture, and as I say, it's not necessarily about the what I'm doing, it's the why I'm doing it. So when your purpose is so powerful and you're so passionate about it, I don't think it's that difficult to get motivated, But as you say, there are days when, at 3 o'clock in the morning, when it's pitch black and it's cold and it's winter, you don't want to get out of that sleeping bag to go on a paddleboard, especially in the night. But I think that's where discipline becomes a really important factor because the reality is we won't always be motivated. We're humans, we're not going to be motivated every day to jump out of bed and do whatever it is, but you can be disciplined every day. It's discipline for me is about still, turning up, getting up and giving it 100%, even when you can't be bothered and you're not feeling it. And I think that's one good thing, what the military really embeds into you. One of the traits that I carry, I think, from the army is the importance of discipline when it comes to sort of achieving your goals, I guess.
What about just having to put a wetsuit back on? Have you got any tips on that? I mean, that is just the worst, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the worst. And you know what? I was never a fan of the wetsuit or the dry suit because it's always like choking you, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's the most uncomfortable thing. And I got quite seasick when we got into Scotland, and I think half of that was because of the sort of strangulation from a wet or a dry suit. I think it's just something you have to deal with. That there's no nice way to go about the wet or dry suit, especially when it's wet. There's nothing worse than putting on a cold, damp wetsuit.
It's miserable.
It's miserable. It's proper miserable.
It's proper miserable. Now, what am I seeing on Instagram? Have you got an Achilles? Have you ruptured your Achilles at the moment? Are you in a bit of bother right now?
Yeah, so I've done my hopefully not a rupture. Just
Okay.
it looks like I don't think it's a rupture. I've been in the physio for the last few days, and I think I'm going to be out for about 6 to 8 weeks with the Achilles. But I've got I'm actually up in Scotland with the Montaigne team on the Isle of Skye in late June. So I need to really get fit. Well, not get fit, but just be good enough to climb on and hike and things by then. So I'm trying to take it easy and just do swimming and sort of light walking at the moment, which is not great, but it is what it is. I think I've been quite lucky over the last few years without any injuries, and I seem to have picked one up just by going for a 5K run down the road. Just nothing extreme or anything, typical, really.
One of these things that you do such incredible feats, and then the small run takes you out for a couple of
Yeah.
weeks. You see that a lot in athletes, don't you? That they can get through the intense emotion, the hard graft, and then something catches them. No, it's frustrating. I bet
Yeah.
you're frustrated. I saw you looking for a shout out for road bikes as well, and I was thinking, what's he planning? Where's he going? Have you got something in the pipeline on the road bikes?
Not specifically yet. I just, I'm always looking to try something new. I've not done much cycling at all, really. So I'm always, I like to think myself as a bit of a sort of multi-discipline adventurer. Oh, always want to push myself, but you learn new things as well along the way. Whether
Yeah.
it's rowing, paddling, whatever it is. I think, if you're prepared to commit to something, and it's an important message for young people. If you want to do something, just get out there and give it a go. There's you learn as you're going along on these things, and that's part of the fun of it, I think.
Is that a reason that took you to the army, that you wanted to try something new? What was your childhood like? Were you straight A's at school? Were you good in the classroom, or were you sort of sent to the military, or was it a last option? What was your route?
I definitely wasn't straight A's, and my upbringing. I'm from Blackpool in Lancashire originally.
Uh-huh.
These days I'm in Hampshire, in on the south coast of England. But I like a lot of kids grew up on a council estate in the northwest of England. Certainly wasn't privileged or anything like that, but didn't do that well at school academically. I left school with very little in terms of qualifications, and then sport and travel, adventure. Those were my things. Like a lot of young soldiers who join at 16, it was a bit of an escape from, things like crime and drugs and the wrong path that's very easy to go down at that age, I think, for a lot of people. And, I owe the military a lot. I have no grudges against the army or anything, because for me they I guess they taught me and embedded those important values of things like respect and courage and loyalty, discipline. They embedded them into me at an early age. And I've been out the army over a decade now, having done a decade in the system, and I still carry those values everywhere I go. I think they're really important, and I try to share them with young people. And I'm very honoured to be, the UK ambassador for Army Cadets and do a lot of work with young people still. So it's a real privilege, really, to be a veteran. I think, I think sometimes we have a bit of a victim mentality in society, especially you can find it in the veterans community sometimes, where, I was a rejoiner, actually. So I left the army, rejoined, and then came back out again. But I remember when I left the first time, after about 5 years, you sort of I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder that the world owed me a bit of a favor, because I'd done my bit for the country. I've served, and someone give me a job now, but actually that's not the way the world works. You have to start again, and if you have to earn your trade, whatever it might be, again at the bottom of the ladder. And I learned a lot by going back in the army the second time, because I went back in the second time, and I was always going to leave again, but I educated myself. I got lots of skills. I did a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and then I hit the ground running the second time I left, and took it with a different approach. The world didn't owe me a favor. I was going to have to work for anything I got, and that really helped me. And I try and share those lessons with friends who are leaving now, that it doesn't matter what rank you've got, what experience, where you've been, what courses you completed. You've got to be prepared to start again, and certainly, if you're leaving the army, you need to be planning for that day from almost the day you join the army, because one day you are going to find yourselves outside the wire, and you have to be ready for that.
Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of guests with military backgrounds, but also athletes, and it's a similar path that you've got to think about the future almost when they start. Just like you said, that it can be such an unknown world that you've been told where to be, what to wear, what you're eating,
Yeah,
for so many years.
and I think it's tough. I think it is a tough transition for for a lot of people. I think the biggest thing you lose or you miss when you leave the military is that sense of purpose. I don't even think you realize it while you've got it. When you're a soldier, nobody likes polishing their boots or their medals, and but actually when you're not, and that's taken away from you, I'm the first one to polish my boots on Remembrance Day, to get on parade with the veterans down the British Legion for a pint or whatever. Whereas now it's a great honor, but when you're serving, you just sort of take it for granted, I think.
Yeah, no, I've heard it before, and it's often a dark place. How were you mentally when you left the army? Did you go through dark periods, dark patches of trying to find your identity? Maybe the first time you left, or and better the second time. How was it for you?
Yeah, I think, it's always tough. But for me, to be very honest, I've had my own mental health challenges, and I take medication still today, but not necessarily, or for me, not part of my military journey or experience. For me, it's the things that we all go through in life. I was in a relationship for over 10 years with the mother of my daughter, and that breaking down was something that I really struggled with. I think I was a loyal, honest guy, but I was always working away, and I think got my priorities wrong. My time management and things. And I came home to an empty house one day, and I really struggled for years, for 3 or 4 years, to process that. And I don't, that's nothing to do with the army. That's just to do with the things that we all experience. A relationship going sour or breaking down when there's children involved is very tough for anybody, I think. And I don't think you ever properly get over that, but you learn to live with it and manage it. And I think the most important thing in life that I've come to learn over the last few years is that you can't change the past. There's nothing you can do about it except take the lessons and move forward. Make sure you don't make those mistakes again, because if you do the same thing twice, then it's not a mistake anymore. It's a choice. You got to learn and keep moving forward, I think.
I've got 3 kids myself. They're all young and 7 and under. And that relationship you have with your daughter, I want to talk to you about the book that you sort of co-authored with her through lockdown and things. But that point of kind of losing your daughter to regaining her in your family and in your life, a difficult time that as a father, I can't imagine what that would be like. And to the depth of, it terrifies me to not have my kids. You've been through that, and now you work with the cadets. You've authored a book with your daughter. Do you worry about the future? Do you worry about your daughter growing up in the world that we're in, with the way things are now? With I'm on Instagram, you're on Instagram, but the influencers that are out there maybe not influencing kids to do the right things. The way the world is progressing, do you worry about your daughter and the cadets that are out there?
100%. I think it's one of my biggest concerns for the future is, we live in a world now where, as you say, social media, this sort of digital generation absorbs us, consumes us, and we're adults and we understand what it's doing to us, yet we still engage with it every day. And but if you're under the age of 10, 12, maybe 15, you've only ever known this. We knew life before this. We knew the life where we would climb trees, go camping, go fishing, and that was normal to us. Someone said to me the other day, I was speaking in a school, and a little boy said to me the other day, he made a comment that said, he said, "Sir, when did you have to go home? When you was playing football with your friends after school, what time did you have to go in?" And I thought about it, and do you know what time I had to go in? It was when the street lights came on. It was never about a time as such. It was just the world we lived in then. But now the risks, the dangers are different to young people, and I think that, especially where social media is concerned, there are a lot of very uninspiring, influential people in the world. There are a lot of people out there who don't use their profile to inspire, to educate, to inform, to motivate. There are a lot of people who just want to sell you whatever product it is. They want to tell you, and it's scary. It's concerning, and I honestly think social media platforms have to sort of regulate it better. I think things like cyberbullying. We've lost cadets in the last 12 months to suicide. People under the age of 16 to things that have gone on online. Bullying, cyberbullying, trolling, and it's scary, and it shouldn't be allowed. There needs to be stronger measures, regulations in place. I see my daughter playing on the iPad sometimes, and we try to manage the sort of how much time she spends on a screen. But sometimes the comments that children make in just these little game chat rooms and things that they're inappropriate, and it's difficult because at the same time, it's the future technology, it's where the opportunities are. So, but do I have the answers? Absolutely not. But I'm a concern, 100%. And I think all that we can do is make sure that like people like ourselves who for whatever reason have some sort of profile and people are interested. We've got to do our best to use that for a force of good in the world. We've got to be a force multiplier to do positive things and send out the right messages. I think that if you've got any public profile, you should have a responsibility to make sure the messages, the tweets, the Instagram posts, the Facebook, whatever it is, it's got to be the right messages that are going out. It's got to be inspiring and encouraging. It's got to be kind. It's got to be supportive. We have a responsibility to do that, I think.
I speak to my wife about that a lot because the kids copy us. They do actually copy us. And if they see a wetsuit going on, they're asking, they've just got their wetsuits now and things like that as they grow up and they can go in the cold water. But it is incredible how they latch onto the good and the bad just as easy. And you start seeing them doing the bad thing or this, that, and the other. And you think, where's he got that from? And you remember you had YouTube on yesterday morning and I was out the room and he's changed it to something else because it predicts what you want to watch next. It's incredible. And I think protecting our kids is important and getting the right people around, whether that's friends, family, or social influences on the media sites. It's crazy.
Oh, definitely. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of good people as well out there doing good things as well. And I think it's important to champion them as well because there are some very inspiring people out there, and I think schools are getting better as well. I think schools are valuing things. I see a lot of this values-based learning now. It's not just about English, maths, and science and sitting in a classroom and PowerPoint or whiteboards or whatever. People talk about values more, the importance of things like respect, integrity, loyalty, discipline. So I see a lot more schools going down this sort of values-based learning. I see things like woodland-based schools and things, outdoor schools. So there are some really positive movements and developments, but we as I say, we can only do our best, I guess. I always think that, I'm never going to change the world, but I can change the world for a handful of kids. And if you can make a difference, then you should make a difference, I think.
Yeah, well, you're doing it. You're living proof. I'm always impressed, and I get the inspiration from you because I do it a lot myself. But the cold water immersion stuff that you do, I saw you today. You're giving your pal a shout out for what he's doing and his YouTube page. What does the cold water do for you? Is it a reset? Does it sort of slow you down a bit and challenge you?
Yeah, I think it's that, I think it's that mindfulness and that being in the moment, and it does. It really refresh. I think doing it in the morning as well, it really sort of sets you up for the day. It revitalizes your system. It refreshes you, resets you, and you just feel good. You get out of the water after 20-25 minutes or so, and you just feel ready to tackle whatever it is the world's got to throw at you. I do really enjoy that. I don't even do much swimming in there. It's more of a dip, I guess, than a
Same as
swim.
me. Same as
You
me.
know,
I get asked about cold water swimming and all that. I said, no, I'm a dunker. I'll jump
yeah,
in. I'll
exactly.
sit there. I'll stand there. I will say it freezes the sore bits for at least half an hour. The sore bits. You walk home or you run home and you think I'm feeling good, and they do start to come back, but you do it gradually, and you get the discipline to do it daily or weekly, whatever people have time for. I think it makes a big difference, and it's certainly taken off. The companies like Dry Robe and all these sorts of things I know you're associated with, but again, they're putting out good energy and telling people to do these things carefully and safely. And
Yeah.
you're seeing more and more people go to the water. It's great.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I think, yeah, I think over the last 12 months, people have really, started to reconnect with nature, and that's one of, I'm always trying to reframe negative situations and circumstances into positive ones. And I think as much as we can talk negative about COVID and things, one of the great things is people's reconnection with the outside world, and also in our home country. People have realized you don't have to travel to the other side of the world for a great adventure. You can get in your back garden with your kids. You can go down the local national park or whatever it is and have a great time as well and do all those things.
Yeah. Now, your relationship with the cold, I know, are you halfway through your marathons in the 10 coldest places in the world? Did you get to 5 and you're going to finish them?
Yeah, I'm gonna finish them over the next 12 months or so. So I've done 4. I did the Yukon, Canada. I did Alaska, USA, Siberia, Russia, and Iceland, and I was on my way to the North Pole when the first COVID hit. So I'm heading back to the North. I'm booked in for the North Pole next April, which is the North Pole season, and I'm hoping to be in Antarctica this year in late November, early December. So. If I can get 1 or 2 more in before then, that'll be brilliant. But I'm not too optimistic with the travel at the moment. Although I'm supposed to be in Africa in 10 days' time to open this school, so we'll see how that goes.
Just sticking to the cold, what are you wearing when you're running in those temperatures? Are you starting with heavy clothes on, or and then reducing layers as you go? How do you take that process of running in such coldness?
Yeah, it really depends on. It's quite interesting because some of the marathons have been, me flying to whatever the country is and doing it where there's no organized marathon, and some of them have been organized races like the Yukon, the Yukon Montane Marathon, for example. That was interesting because you got checkpoints to meet as well. So if you don't get to a certain point by a certain time, you can be scratched out of a race. So the challenge is you want to run at a speed where you don't sweat, because you don't sweat too much, because obviously the sweat freezes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to run too slow because you're going to get too cold anyway. So it's finding the balance and being able to regulate your own body temperature. And the only way I found that you can really do that is by getting out and testing it. One of my friends says, "Don't trust it, test it," and you've got to just go through the motions of layering up, layering down, and regulating your body temperature. But typically, I'm not wearing ridiculously excessive kit. You get quite warm quite quickly, so I think most of the time I'm carrying warm kit in my bag. It's when you stop, for a water break or a break, it's about getting something warm on quickly then, because I think that's where you're really affected. But I'm not doing that much more. Sometimes I might have a bit of frost tape on, cover my face depending on how cold it is. But when we were in the Yukon, I think that was the coldest yet. And 2 days before we arrived, it was minus 63 with wind chill. I think when we ran, it was like minus 35, minus 37. But it's incredible. But I don't know why, but I do enjoy the cold more than the hot, I think.
Okay, then what about the cryo chamber? Talk me through that marathon. How long did that take, and who came up with that idea? Was it you, or was it one of your team that said, "Come on, let's get one more done before lockdown"?
Yeah, well, I guess so. That was when the North Pole, when they sent us back on the way to when we were going to go to the North Pole. We went into this lockdown, and then a company in Poole in Dorset reached out to me, and they said, Jordan, why don't you do one of your marathons, because you can't do it now in a cryo chamber. We don't think anyone's done a marathon before. So I thought, well, why not? So we called it isolation, of course, because of COVID and what
Nice.
have you. Yeah, so yeah, we did it. It took all day. It took about 8 hours. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't nice. The treadmill kept freezing up in the in the chamber, which made it even more difficult. But again, it was just about being creative. We live streamed it, and I think with a lot of these fundraising things, it's just about being innovative, creative, trying to think outside the box and do things sometimes that haven't been done before, because that's what sparks the imagination of the donors, the sponsors, the public. And I think that's what people are always looking for, something different, because fundraising sector is so competitive. Everyone's done everything. Everyone's ran a race, a marathon, jumped out of a plane, climbed a mountain, whatever it might be. So it's trying to find what that twist is that you can differentiate from the wider market, I think.
Well, let's talk about the other one that you did when you went underground. And that was that a world record? The deepest marathon under the ground?
Yeah, the deepest underground marathon. Yeah, that was with the Army Cadets, sort of flying the flag of the Army Cadets for young people's mental health. And the project was called What Happens Beneath the Surface, to show people that, of course, the mental health sort of connotation there. And yeah, we did. That was one of the toughest things actually physically I've ever done, because I'd been on a paddleboard for 3 months at the time, so I'd not done any training, not even walking, and I've been literally stood still on a paddleboard. And then I jumped off it for 24 hours for World Mental Health Day, which was on the 10th of October, just gone. And yeah, I've never felt pain and agony like it. The cramp after sort of even 16, 17 miles was horrendous. And we had all our mining gear on. We had helmets and all sorts of kit on, and 1,000 meters below the Earth's surface. So it was actually one of the most challenging things I've ever done, even though, people might not appreciate that.
Oh, definitely. Where was it, and where was the mine?
So the mine is in a place called Bolby, which is just outside Middlesbrough in the northeast of England. It's a polyhalite mine, and it goes out underground near Whitby, and it goes out into the North Sea. So you're running under the sea, essentially. It's an incredible place, and an amazing project to be a part of. It was brilliant.
Excuse my ignorance, but what's down there? What's in the tunnels? And is there people working there daily, or is it an old disused tunnel, or what's?
No, it's a fully operational mine. Just loads of tunnel, like you would imagine. I'd never been down a mine before, but like you would imagine, little sharp sort of tight sort of corridor type things, just bricks on the walls and dark and really hot as well. It was like 25, 30 degrees down there as well.
Really? Right, okay.
Yeah, the miners are there chipping away and going about the daily business or whatever. It was, they're quite incredible people actually, because they work. They go down there in the early hours of the morning when it's dark, and they come back up late at night and it's still dark. And I was thinking it must play with your psychological sort of outlook on life. And it's special people, I think, the people that do that, because it's a bit of a thankless task. We just sort of take it for granted that these people are down there. You don't really consider it. I don't think.
No, absolutely. I mean, that one, when I was doing my research, and I was like, the deepest marathon world record. I mean, is it one lift that takes you all the way down? What's this?
Yeah, one lift, and it's like goes on forever.
Endless.
You're in there you're in like 15 minutes or something in this lift, and it's pitch black as well. And it's pretty daunting actually. And we had to the guy from the Guinness World Records and things, that we had to film it all, because there was a lot of safety aspects. We couldn't take things like digital watches down there. There was lots of special requirements on the camera and the sort of GPS tracking, because so many things weren't allowed to go down there for safety reasons, and it created a spark and all this sort of thing. So we had to have lots of tests before we went in there. There was people in the team who came down, and then we had to go and do a risk assessment a few months before, and certain people dropped out of the event because you don't know what it's like to be 1,000 meters below the surface until you go and do it. So you have to go and test it and make sure you're comfortable with it and things, because obviously if something goes wrong and you're under the sea, that's the end, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was that playing on your mind? I mean, you've been in some pretty dangerous situations, but when you're down there, did you feel safe?
Yeah, I felt safe. I'm a bit, I don't know. I've always believed, wherever I go in the world, I take risk management very serious. And, that's what I've done my studies in. My degree in the army was in risk management. But I've always believed that, I guess, when your time's up in this world, your time's up. I always think that everyone's cards are marked and they've got an expiry date. And I'm not reckless in that at all. I just think that if it's time to go, it's time to go, you know, wherever you are.
I'm gonna jump about a bit because I need to know about Kilimanjaro barefoot. I mean, that's something that I have been asked, would I do Kilimanjaro? And yeah, I would consider that, but barefoot's a different story. How did that come around to do it barefoot, the invitation? What was the event? What was the charity? Tell us that story.
Yeah, it was for a cancer charity, and actually, it wasn't my going to Kilimanjaro wasn't my idea or my expedition. It was two friends who were still in the military, and they basically invited me along as an extra sort of bod to do the expedition. And while we were sort of planning to go there, I said, why don't we do it a bit differently? I said, why don't we take our shoes off and do it? And of course, they said, don't be stupid. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. And anyway, long story short, I went along
Was
with
there
it.
any alcohol involved when that came up? Or
Of course there was.
well, that
And
was I had Sean Conway on. Do you know Sean, the
yeah,
adventurer?
Sean's a good friend. He's a great bloke, isn't he?
I'm
Very
right.
inspiring as well.
I hope I get this right, but he went up it in a penguin suit, did he not?
Oh, I don't know, but it
Sure he
wouldn't
did.
surprise me.
I
It
might
wouldn't
have
surprise me.
either that or he ran a marathon or something. He did something in a penguin suit. I think it was Kilimanjaro, and he bet his friends over drinks and all that sort of stuff. So
Oh, quite possibly.
another
He's a
crazy
good
guy.
man, Sean. But yeah, you know, that was it was a really important at the time. I didn't, you know, at the time it was just a weird and wacky idea, but actually it became a great lesson for me, that whole project, because it was the first time I realized that by doing something just a little bit different, that you can raise substantial funds and awareness for whatever your cause is. And my friends who went along, who did a great job, they supported walking alongside me, which took them a bit longer, but they raised, you know, 1,000 or two, and I raised like 60 to 70,000. And all I did was the same, but with no shoes on. And for me, that was my first real introduction to thinking outside the box with regards to fundraising, because it was the first time also I'd ever given expedition a bit of branding. We had a website and a logo and called it Barefoot Warrior, and I've used that same model and just sort of kept refining it and tweaking it ever since. You know, think of a weird and wonderful expedition, give it a bit of branding, make it a bit quirky, build a website, and that's what I try and do each time I do one of these challenges. Really, is that model of just, I'm not the fittest, I'm not the fastest, you know, I'm not some kind of superhuman, I'm not special forces or anything like that. I'm a normal guy who tries to take on these challenges. So for me, you know, I have to think of ways to make them more appealing to the media, to you know, the public, the donors. So it's a bit of a cycle, because the more awareness you get, the more interest in the project, the more awareness you get, the more media coverage you get, and ultimately the more sponsors you get and donations. And that's what you're ultimately trying to do, is maximize those donations. So people are interested in weird people doing wonderful things, aren't they?
What were you doing all these weird things and wonderful things? You're absolutely right. When the TV channels started to get in touch and when Hunted sort of became part of your life, were you quite well known then, or did you just have to go an audition, or how did the Hunted opportunity come about?
Do you know, that was when I was in the army. I was in a cavalry regiment, so tanks was my thing. You know, I was a combat soldier in a tank regiment, but I did 2 tours of Iraq, working in intelligence. And part of my job in intelligence was what's called I used to handle prisoners and a tactical questioner. So, you know, we would, one of my jobs would be to extract information when prisoners were captured or caught or detained or whatever. And you know, I didn't spend a lot of time doing that, but it was part of my remit. And that little bit of responsibility that I had on those tours 10 years ago was ironically what played me into working on the Hunted show. You know, somebody met, some producer somewhere got wind of some people who worked in intelligence a little bit and had a bit of a profile. And I got a phone call one day, do I want to audition? I went down there and I guess I passed the test, or whatever it was, the screen tests. And yeah, and I've been doing sort of 4 series of that now, and we've got 2 more coming up later this year to film. So yeah, it's weird, isn't it? The world, how it works, and the junctions and the turns you make, and where life takes you.
How did you take to that? I mean, the TV world obviously must have been something sort of brand new to you, and you're used to the military life and the adventure side of things, and now you maybe some corporate people, you directors, producers. Did you go quite smoothly into that world?
Yeah, really smoothly, because you know what, I've always see TV. It's like a game, you know. It's entertainment ultimately. You know, when we're on the show Hunted, you know, a lot of the people who work on the show are still serving police officers. They're real life detectives, and that's what they do. So for them, they often approach it very differently, because for them it's serious business. They're hunting a fugitive and they need to catch that fugitive. Whereas for me, maybe I shouldn't say this to the public, but I see it as fun. I love it. I love the chase. I love the fact that I'm an adventure guy, so I'm always getting given a helicopter or a rib or whatever it is. So I love the adventure side of it and the unknown. Whereas for me, of course I want to catch them, but is it the end of the world if we don't catch them? No, absolutely not. And what I love most about it is it's helped me do some good things in the world. I think it's helped me to, what we talked about before, it's give my profile a boost.
Yeah.
And I'm able to use that to be an ambassador or a patron of various charities and do some good in the world. So, I'm very privileged to have that position. I think I don't take it lightly, and my mission is to use it to do some good in the world.
Yeah, well, that good. I touched on it earlier. The book that you wrote with your daughter, the flags and the colouring book and things like that. What was that process like doing that with your daughter? Was it,
It was
father daughter? How was it?
Oh, it's brilliant. We've done another one. We haven't published it yet. All about Great Britain. That was about the flags and the countries of the world and what have you. And that actually came from a project that was a New Year's resolution of my daughter's. She wanted to learn every capital city of the world, and she's incredible. She puts me to shame. So her mission was to learn every capital city in the world, 196 countries, and she did that, and she could do that. So when we were in lockdown, she loves art and she loves design, and that's her thing at school at the moment. And we came up with this idea of let's make a book about capitals and flags and countries, and it was our way of learning. And then we just shared that with the rest of the world and published it. So it was brilliant, and it's really helpful as well. We got someone to sponsor 1,000 copies for NHS key workers locally where I am in Hampshire, and a local charity gave them out. So it was a brilliant project, and it's helped adults as well, because I've learned just as much about the world by doing that project.
I'll bet, and I bet there's a lot of adults, myself included, that probably don't know as many capital cities as we should and know what flags are which country. So no, a great project that you did. You mentioned 196 there, and when I was looking through your Instagram, you were doing a shout out for Nick Butter. So we'll give him a shout out as he's
man.
He's getting around the UK. 200 marathons in 100 days at the moment. I mean,
200 marathons in 100 days, which is just absolutely mind blowing. And he's the first person to run a marathon in every country of the world already. And he's had some touch wood, hopefully no more, but he's had some little minor hiccups early on with niggles and things with Achilles and with calves and little strains. But hopefully he'll have no further issues. He seems to be back in the swing of it now. But what an incredible feat of endurance that is. I just can't even comprehend doing 2 marathons in one day, then getting up and doing it all again. Never mind doing it for 100 days consecutively.
Well, that's it. Just keep getting up and keep just having the will to keep going. But he'll be like you in the way you get through your challenges. He's got his charity. He's got that end game. He's got that belief. And I think that's what maybe differentiates you guys from, I don't know, Joe Public, that you are able to pick a target and won't quit until you get to that target.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's I think adventure with purpose is so much more powerful than just adventure. I think because it, like you say, it allows you to strive to push those boundaries, and hopefully by doing so, like Nick's doing, you inspire lots of other people to go and try and take on a challenge or fulfill their goals or ambitions or dreams. So it's really important. And I think, as I said earlier, when you lose when you leave the military, especially, you lose a lot of purpose. And I think finding things like charitable causes and good causes gives you that sense of purpose again, that you've got a mission that you want to accomplish.
Yeah, now I know when you left the military, you moved into security and you got an opportunity on the ships, sort of running protecting them from the pirates. Can you dive into that a little bit for us? Just because I know that Citadel, your book came from that, and it sounds exciting, but it sounds terrifying when these guys board, and you're probably laughing, you probably say, no, it was not accurate. But all I can think of is Captain Phillips and when the Somali pirates get on there. The Hollywood sort of puts this vision and puts this scenario in our heads. What is it like really when the Somali pirates are charging your boat and you see them coming and you're in charge?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I was more scared than I've ever been. I think anyone when there's guns and bullets and all that sort of stuff, there's always an element of being scared. I I don't care who you are, you know, of course there's adrenaline, there's excitement, but if someone's trying to take your life for whatever reason, whether you're a soldier or you're in the private sector, there's an element of being scared in that. You know, I think it's only human and natural. But yeah, you know, being on the high seas, a bit like being a soldier in many respects. You know, 99% of it is sitting around, not doing that much. You know, but it's about that discipline and not becoming complacent, because you know, when you become complacent, that's when things normally go wrong. But we had some. Again, it was lots of great life lessons working on in the Indian Ocean and the Gulf of Aden. You know, I spent 5 years in and out of some of the most beautiful parts of the world, like, you know, the Dubai, Seychelles, Mauritius, the Maldives. You know, that's fortunately for us where all the pirates hung out. So we were always in hotels in these nice places. But of course, when things go wrong, you know, that's where you earn your salary as a security team, you know, leader or team member. And there was a couple of times where things nearly went horribly wrong, but we managed to get home and, you know, tell the tale as it was. But it was, I think with the book The Citadel as well, I really wanted to tell the story, not just the story or that the media would have you as believe, you know, that the pirates are the bad guys and we're some kind of heroes, because actually it's not as simple as that. The pirates, you know, in Somalia at the time, they'd had, you know, illegal fishing on the Somali coast by Western trawlers, trawlers from the Far East, you know, illegal fishing from Chinese trawlers, vessels. They destroyed the Somali economy where fish stocks and things was concerned. And you see, I don't know if you see the new Netflix documentary, Seaspiracy, as well. It's quite interesting, you know, and the Somali people rely on fish, you know, whether it's for their own food and protein, but also for commercial reasons. You know, it's a country that has been at civil war for 20, 30 years. It's a country where the average salary is a couple of dollars a day. So when that's taken away from them, of course they're going to respond. Of course they're going to react. It's not just a case of these are terrorists or criminals and they're trying to attack ships. You know, we made a very good living out of it as ex-military security personnel, but at the same time, we were no heroes there. We were there for financial reasons alone. You know, we spent a lot of time away from our families. You know, and for me, to be honest, that was ultimately probably one of the reasons why my relationship broke down with the mother of my daughter, because I was, you know, working on ships for 2-3 months at a time with no communications back home, and, you know, not really fair when you've got a young family at all by any means.
I'm kind of asking you to go into the mind of a pirate, but would they know what was on the boat? Would they have sort of intelligence that there's things that we want from that boat, or were they trying to capture people for ransoms? What would usually be the target for them to go for a boat?
Yeah, all of the above, really. But yeah, it's quite using open source basic intelligence gathering. You know, a Google search engine, you can find out quite a lot about a vessel these days. You know, with things like marine traffic and live tracker, you can find out where a vessel's been, where it's going, what cargo's on board, how many people, what nationality is the crew. So you don't need to be that, you know, smart to find that information. But ultimately, you know, the cargo's got, if the cargo's just been fully laden with a couple of $100 million worth of oil out of a Saudi Arabian port or something, you know, that's obviously a high value target. Then you've got a vessel, you know, one of these tankers, again, they're worth a couple of $100 million straight off. And then you've got, you know, a Western crew of British or American, you know, you've hit the jackpot here. So it's, you know, often it wasn't the case, because typically the companies that had a lot of money, they would always carry security. It was the smaller companies with, you know, who perhaps didn't take security seriously that often got hit, because, you know, going through that area were hundreds of vessels every day. So typically pirates would approach a vessel. If it had a security team on board, they would fire a few warning shots and the pirates would go away. And 99% of the time, that's what would happen, you know, and the pirates would wait for a ship that didn't have security on, because only one in every 4 at the time, you know, carried security. So it was quite rich pickings, really, for the pirates.
And what would be what's the route for them to get on these ships? Because they're so big, the ships, and they're obviously in these speedboats and things. How would they get on board?
Yeah, so typically they would use what we call skiffs, so sort of, you know, fast sort of fishing boats with engines, if you like, small fishing boats, crafts for moving around. They would do maybe 25, 30 knots, and so they could always outrun the speed of one of these big tankers by, you know, by 5 or 10 knots. So for them, it was, you know, they're looking, they're looking for the easiest target. So, you pull up alongside a ship, you're looking, has it got security? Has it got razor wire? Has it got fire hoses out? Are the crew on watch? Are they alert? It's like, it's no different than, for me, a criminal who's going to rob your house. He's looking for a window open with no alarm, or the family's away from home. And as a security person, in the purest form, when we're defending a ship or defending a building or a residence, I always try to put my mind frame that of a pirate or that of a criminal. How am I going to attack this ship? So when I'm putting out my defenses, I try to think like a pirate or a criminal and think, this is where I would attack. They're looking for a low freeboard. They're looking for access points. They're looking for breaks in the razor wire. They're looking for slow moving vessels. That no crew on watch looking out. So. And they literally come up, they've got grappling hooks, they've got ladders, and these guys can move so quickly. It's incredible, really, to watch them do it. It's fascinating. The skill level is probably on par with the Royal Marines or the Special Forces, the way they board these vessels that quickly. It's amazing.
So yeah, even impresses you, because you've seen guys working sort of the best of the best. These guys, they're sort of athletes. They're in good shape. They're able to do it.
Yeah, but they're often these people, they come from very humble, poor backgrounds. They've not had any training. The weapons very unreliable, even if they work, rusty. They're very, very low skilled. But what they have got is they've got an incentive. They've got an incentive for a better life. These ships were being hijacked. Ransoms were going for 10, 12, $15 million from 4 16-year-olds hijacking a super tanker. So when you put yourself in their shoes, they've got perhaps everything to gain and very little to lose, going back home to a civil war with no job, no prospects. It's a tough life for them.
What was your mindset like when you started your role? And forgive me, I can't remember the name of the stretch, but the most dangerous shipping lane in the world. What was your mindset like when you had done all the training? You knew the shipping lane, how dangerous it was. People were probably telling you can't do it and you won't succeed. What were you like in that first day?
I always knew that it was. I always knew it was doable and achievable because the distance wasn't that significant, but it was always the security risks that made it dangerous. Because I was essentially rowing across the area that we've just been talking about, for the last couple of minutes, and so terrorism, pirates, military patrols, all of the above were in that area. But I'd also spent 6 or 7 years working that area, so I knew those waters so intrinsically. It was the military in the region I knew very well. I'd worked out of Djibouti for several years. I knew the director of maritime for the country. I knew the military patrols in the area. I knew all the local agents. I knew the Coast Guard. So for me, I was able to pull that together based on a lot of network that I'd built over the previous years. Of course, when I'm selling it to the public, I'm not showing them all these things that I've got in place. I'm selling it as this incredibly, ludicrous idea of rowing across this strait. But as I say, it wasn't. Some people say it was reckless, but I had a lot of contingencies in place, and I knew that area extremely well. But of course, there's always that. We're rowing across a very dangerous area. We're going to Yemen. There's a civil war in Yemen. Of course, it's still dangerous, and you can only control, to a certain degree, so many aspects of it. There's still the sort of the unknown unknowns that I would call, the things that you haven't thought about that you don't even know about.
Yeah.
It's still a challenge.
Now, I know you've ticked off a lot of things that people have never done before. Is there any challenges or things that people have done that you think, oh, I'd love to take that on, or that is on the bucket list one day? I'm gonna accomplish that.
That's a great question. That I've never thought about that, to be honest. It's a good question though. I would love to go and do something on the Yukon River. There's some great challenges on the Yukon River in northern Canada between sort of Alaska and the Yukon. Maybe even, I've not been back on a paddleboard since I stepped off it, but maybe either rowing, kayaking, or canoeing or paddling. There's a challenge up there called the Yukon 1000, and it's 1,000 miles in 10 days. And it's one of the toughest endurance races, certainly for paddle sports in the world. And there's something really special about the Yukon. I think it's probably one of the most incredible places I've ever been to. I think the oxygen is so pure, the people are so friendly, the wildlife, the nature is just magnificent. I think I would love to go and do something in the Yukon again, and maybe it would be the Yukon River something. I think.
And what about team events? Are you ever asked to do team team endurance events or things like that? Because a lot of the stuff you've done has been solo. It's you against yourself a lot of the time in your own mind. What about joining up with teams, or I don't know, scale? Oh, Everest has probably been offered to you and things like that, but going with a team and just sort of leading the team to do something that no one's ever done before.
Yeah, do you know, I would love to do something with cadets, actually. I would love to. We're working on a few opportunities with young people, sort of Duke of Edinburgh Award gold, people who have achieved gold in the cadets. And we've bounced a few ideas about. I've been offered a couple of slots in rowing teams for the Atlantic and things like that. And maybe in the next year or two, certainly something I would love to do a team event, but probably nothing as enduring as long as the paddle. I don't want to be going away for months. I think maybe a couple of weeks at best. And actually, the Yukon 1000 is a team event as well. So
Okay.
that may be something. The paddle up there is a team event. So maybe that's something for the future.
How do you, just the last question for you, because I know we're running on here, but just maintaining your fitness, because you have such a diverse background and things you've accomplished. Are you pretty disciplined on your fitness, whether it be running, rowing, cycling? Do you have a sort of core where you try to keep yourself in case a challenge comes up with sort of short notice? How do you maintain?
No, not really. No, I'm far from super fit. I'm as I say, I'm a pretty ordinary person in that respect. I think you always keep a general level of fitness just by going about your daily business. But I'm not somebody who loves going to the gym. I love adventure. I love sports, but I don't love standing in front of a mirror lifting weights or anything like that. It's the worst thing for me. But oh, yeah. I think when you're going to do an expedition or an adventure, you have to get expedition fit. So if I know I'm going to do something, I will train for it. Otherwise, like the underground marathon, you suffer the consequences if you don't. But it's about being disciplined again, I guess, and being prepared. But I also think that a lot of challenges are psychological. I think that that the mind is capable of much more than a lot of people think. I think that a lot of people probably operate at 30-40% of what they're capable of, but it's about putting yourself in those. Someone once said to me, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's where the magic happens. And I love that. It's those times where it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're getting in off the west coast of Scotland, or you're on a rowing boat across the middle of the Gulf of Aden or whatever. It's that when you're out of your comfort zone where you really grow as a person. You learn a lot about yourself, about life, about the people around you. And as well, we mentioned just to go back a step, about not working in teams as such, but I would always say that everything that I've done, even though it might not be someone on the ground with me, there's always an amazing team with me at some, whether it's someone doing social media, someone project managing, or logistics support, or a filmmaker, cameraman. I think pretty much every challenge I've done, there's always been a lot of amazing unsung heroes that don't like to be in front of the camera or whatever. So I think if you're going to do anything worth achieving in life, you always need great people around you. And I think it's really important actually to surround yourself with people who inspire you, who motivate you, because I think the world is full of people who've given up on their dreams long ago, especially adults, not young people. But adults will spend half their life talking you out of things what you can't do, and it's our job, as I say, to convince people that they can do anything.
Well, good on you for giving the sort of backroom team a shout out. I had Laura Penhall on the show, who was Mark Beaumont's team manager when he went around the world, and she was just very honest about, she would lose track of her own wellness. She would lose track of her own diet and what she was doing because she was so concentrated on getting him around the world. And you giving a shout out to your team and the people that do all the unseen work. It is so crucial
No,
to
absolutely.
all the money that's raised.
There's a lady who it would be great to put you in touch with, actually, called Paula Reed. I don't know if you've come across Paula. She's called the adventure psychologist, and she's pioneering in this new discipline of adventure psychology, which is a sub discipline of, I guess, performance psychology. But most people talk about sports psychology, whereas adventure psychology is very different, because you think of sport and typically it's in a fixed environment with a fixed set of rules, with a defined end state. Whereas adventure it doesn't fit into any of those things. You don't know when the end's going to come. The rules are changing, the conditions, the environment's changing every day, and so it's a very different set of circumstances. And Paula would be a great guest because she was my adventure psychologist. And to be completely honest, and I say it to Paula, I never really considered the importance of psychology in adventure. You know, I just sort of took it for granted that you crack on and get your head down. But I would put a lot of my continued paddling down to the skill sets and the tools that she almost give me and trained me in, you know, things like being able to reframe, things like being able to turn, you know, negative or unhelpful thoughts into positive and neutral ones when you're in the zone, you know, when you're getting frustrated. I think, you know, she's not someone who just talks about it from an academic perspective. She's skied to the South Pole, she sailed around the world, so you know, she's a pracademic, I guess. You know, she's done both sides, so
she's done it.
She'd be a really interesting person to chat to, you know, from an adventure psychology perspective.
I'd love to speak to her. I've written her name down. An intro would be awesome. And it's Jordan,
definitely.
That has flown in. Thank you so much for giving me your time. I know I pestered you a little bit to get this done, but it's been brilliant, and been a big fan of everything that you've accomplished, and will continue to support you. So keep doing your thing. It's brilliant to watch what you're doing.
You're incredibly kind, mate, and you know you've got an awesome platform there. You've had some incredibly inspiring guests, you know. So I love what you're doing. So right back at you. Keep up the inspiring work. Keep telling the stories and keep inspiring others. So thanks for having me on the show as well, mate. I really appreciate it.
No probs. All the best. Speak soon.
Cheers, mate. Take care.